You look suspiciously tanned. What have you been up to?
Oh, just interviewing people, Martior and Jenna Husting and Boise.
That's Idaho, right?
Sure is, and Lee Basham.
Who's in Texas, if my sources are correct.
They are. Hold on, you have sources checking up on Lee's whereabouts?
That's a material. I said that's a material. So, you've been gallivanting, have you? And in the lockdown.
No. It was all done over Zoom.
Then why the remarkably windswept sunburned face then? Answer me that.
Pies.
Pies?
Yes, pies. Notably a very sticky experiment in recreating a pie from the service station. Turns out getting a pie to that weird, just out of the warmer feel is a lot harder and a lot messier than you might think.
Pies.
Yes, as I said, pies.
Well, the pie code requires that I don't ask any more questions, but if I find you've even stepped foot outside your bubble, there will be consequences.
Such as?
Well, no more pies. Forever. Mwahahaha.
The podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy has the following to say about pies in Aotearoa, New Zealand. They are the most important foodstuff ever invented. Although the origin of the meat pie is still shrouded in mystery, the classless nature of such pies is extraordinary. Whether you are rich or poor, Maori or Pākehā, you do not just eat pies, you love them. And because the pie is effectively a dish that cannot be made haute cuisine, the pie acts as a way to bring the lower, middle and upper classes together. Or at least it should. Unfortunately, it turns out that class divisions cannot be solved by meat wrapped in pastry alone. Still, it makes New Zealanders feel superior to their Australian neighbours, who have much lower standards when it comes to pies.
The Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, brought to you today by Josh Addison and Dr. M. Denton. Hello and welcome to the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, or as I like to call it, the only reason I have for trimming my beard. I, of course, am Josh Addison, sitting in Auckland, New Zealand. They, of course, Dr. M. R.X. Dentith, sitting also in Auckland, New Zealand, but in quite a different part of it because we're still in lockdown.
And we are social distancing like we've never social distanced before.
Or another way of putting it, we're social distancing exactly the same way we have before for the last 3 or 4 weeks. But that's okay.
Woe to broke the illusion. Woe to broke the illusion. I know what my mouth words say.
That's okay. The connection just went wonky when you said it, so it didn't make anything any worse than it already was. So I guess because COVID-19 is the only thing anyone can talk about at the moment, if you're not listening from New Zealand, the announcement at the start of this week is that starting next Tuesday, New Zealand is moving to level 3 lockdown, down from level 4, which for us doesn't mean a lot. It's more a bunch more businesses can go back to work, but they're still, if you can work from home, work from home. Schools are opening, but if you can keep your children at home, keep them at home. So for us, probably not going to feel particularly different, but at least the country is starting to get back on its feet again.
I mean, you seem very optimistic about this. I think that the move to level 3 is going to bring a resurgence of COVID-19 because every single person I follow on Twitter and on Facebook is talking about how they're going to a midnight KFC or McDonald's self-service line, at which point the virus is going to spread like nothing else on Earth.
Well, yes, we may in the end all be undone by fast food. Yes, that's one of the things. Restaurants can open provided they can offer a sort of contactless delivery service or a drive-through option. So everybody's like, I haven't eaten McDonald's / Wendy's / Burger King / KFC for the last month. That's the first thing I'm going to do. I personally plan to wait a few days and then go and infect myself at a drive-through.
Given there are so few vegan options out there, I'll be waiting forever.
Yes. Anyway, as is becoming something of a tradition now, we've got another new patron this week.
We do, and they're the mysterious M, which I kind of feel
I
is
thought you had the
treading
monopoly on that. Yeah.
is really treading on my toes
You
there. So
just...
you watch out, M, if
Mm,
that's your real name. Actually, it's even worse.
mm,
Their longer name is very similar to my other old name. So it's very confusing. Frankly, I think there's something deeply wrong with the universe.
mm.
Which brings us quite nicely to something which is deeply wrong with Australia, the Harold Holt Memorial Swimming Centre, which we failed to note last week because we weren't even aware of it.
Yes, but it turns out, I assume the irony was commented on at the time and continues to be so.
Well, no, it's named after he died.
Right, yeah.
So it was a swimming centre that's existed since, I believe, the late 1920s, early 1930s. And after Harold Holt died, it then became the Harold Holt Memorial Swimming Centre. So it was a swimming centre and then he died. It was he died and then they named the swimming centre after him, which just seems, in my mind, icky, insulting, and so very Australian.
Yeah, I mean, yes.
No, would you send your children to be taught how to swim at the Harold Holt Memorial Swimming Centre?
Well, I mean, yes.
No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't send your children to learn to swim at a centre named after someone who died of drowning while swimming in the sea. It is not the appropriate name for a swimming centre.
I'm kind of in two minds because he did. I mean, he quite literally died doing what he loved. He was famous for
accept
enjoying
the conspiracy
swimming.
theories.
If you don't accept the conspiracy theories, yes. So, I mean, yeah, yes, it is the way he died, but it's also the way he lived. Kind of.
Okay, you've got me there.
Yeah.
They've
But
named
yes, no,
him after
I
the
see
thing he enjoyed doing so much it killed him.
Yeah. Yes. No. Yes. I do see the slight ickiness there, but yeah. Now we're going back to another staple of this podcast that we haven't done in a while. You've gone and recorded yourself an interview with some of your contemporaries, your confederates.
Confederates, yes, yeah, that's all right. Confederates it is. Yes, I recorded.
Did I say Confederates or Confederates? Because that would
Confederate. Well, okay, all right. So you may have said Confederates, but what came across on the call was Confederates, and frankly, Confederates it should be from now on in.
That's probably closer to the original French or something anyway. So I'm going to stick by it actually. But yeah, so your various partners in what I loosely term crime. Have you and the bunch of them have had a bit of a chinwag this very morning.
Indeed. So yes, I had a conversation with Lee Basham, who's in Texas, and Marty Orr and Jenna Husting, who are in Boise in Idaho. And we had a discussion that started off as a look at COVID-19 conspiracy theories and ended the way this podcast always ends.
With a discussion of popular culture.
Including a discussion of the lead actor who's in the Big Lebowski, which none of us could name, even though we all knew who it was.
Yeah, I thought there was a bit of confusion to begin with, because were you actually, I think some of you thought you were trying to name the other guy who's a Big Lebowski, not obviously Jeff Bridges, who gets, but yes, no, you'll see when you hear the episode. It ends the way all of our episodes end, and I think that's a good thing, quite frankly. Why are their voices pounding down our hallway? Anyway.
Is your house infested with ghosts?
Probably. Or it could be my children. You never know. They do these things.
Your ghost children?
Yes.
Josh, when did you kill your children?
I saw a thing on Twitter the other day, completely sidestepping that question, wanting a reporter genuinely wanting to hear from people who are currently forced into quarantine in houses that they genuinely believe are haunted. Yes.
Yes, I must admit that when I saw that tweet, I went, that's a really good question. How are the haunted coping with the lockdown?
But I guess we'll never know, because neither you nor any of your interlocutors, that'll do, yes, live in haunted houses as far as I know.
And you, of course, are sidestepping the issue that you killed your children recently and now being
Mm.
haunted by their corpses.
You do need to rig up something, though. I see, for those of you just listening on the podcast, M's bedroom, you can see the bedroom door directly behind you. You really need some sort of mechanism so that it sort of ominously swings open of its own volition during the recording or something.
I'm actually kind of hoping the cat is going to force the door open, because that would be wonderfully ominous.
Anyway, I'm probably going to edit this about 2 minutes ago when we had that awkward silence and stop things there. But assuming that we carry on like this, shall we go straight to the interview now?
And luckily, the podcast version is going to have a lot of mention of the fact that Josh refuses to talk about why he killed his children.
Good then.
So I am joined by 3 esteemed colleagues who are currently in various states of lockdown in the Northern Hemisphere. We've got Marty Orr, Jenna Husting, and Lee Basham. We're all conspiracy theory theorists, and all of our work has been discussed on the podcast in the past. I thought it'd be interesting to talk about how we're dealing with our conspiracy theories in the age of COVID-19, especially since, like the authors of the various stories in the Decameron, we're kind of stuck at home thinking about our plight and the civilization we live in and trying to work out, what do we do next? Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Greetings.
Hi.
So we've got 2 people in Boise and 1 person in Texas. How are things going in your relative locations? We'll start with Lee.
There's no virus, and they do have a curfew.
No, we don't. Oh, so you have a curfew. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, we have a curfew here. It's from, let's see, you can go around from 5 in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, but then everyone's supposed to be back in their little hidey holes and homes. But where I live, there's no sheriff. It's it. You might see him down the highway once in a while, but so people around here do pretty much what they please. They travel when they wish, unless you're going to get on the highway, then you might get to see the sheriff. But we're so far back, totally at the end of the road here, that, just my neighbors. 300 meters that way, 500 meters the other way.
Well, Marty and Jenna are in a slightly more populous location. How are things going in Boise?
There are a few. I think we are under what they're calling a stay-at-home order. Essential services, as described by the governor, are available. I haven't gone farther than I can walk, but there still seems to be a fair amount of traffic from what I can tell. We've actually had people challenging these stay-at-home directives in a number of different ways. But we aren't leaving, and so I guess it's a little bit hard to say what others are doing, but from what I can tell, I can see the arterial from my house, so there's still a fair amount of traffic.
And Jenna?
Yeah, same thing. It seems like we've got some organized resistance to staying at home, sheltering in place, and it's organized, and it's meant to be political in some really kind of surprising ways. Protests, occupying playgrounds, and then when expecting to be arrested, when arrested, setting up a protest against the arrest, stuff like that. A lot of people in Boise are out and about. It's the weather here is beautiful, and it's getting warmer. And I think the idea is this doesn't really exist, or it's been overhyped, and this is unnecessary. So it's odd. And then I've heard from some friends in places like Florida and Georgia, which are both having similar and probably worse issues, where there's even less concern about staying home. I think Georgia hasn't been able to slow its spread down at all. It's still on that J curve up.
Well, so we're discovering that we have a small but litigious sovereign citizen movement here in Aotearoa, New Zealand,
Really?
who have gone to our Supreme Court to sue the Prime Minister for putting everyone into home detention for the last 3.5 weeks, and arguing that for home detention to work, there must have been a writ of habeas corpus sent to every single citizen in the country. And the Prime Minister is actually acting on orders of our own local version of Bill Gates or George Soros, a man by the name of Stephen Tindall, who basically runs our equivalent of Kmart.
Oh my gosh.
Now,
That's pretty
no
nice.
one had told me that Stephen Tindall is the billionaire who funds liberals and the liberal agenda. Otherwise, I would have been asking for money for him for quite some time now.
Wow.
It turns
Yeah,
out that-
yeah, you should probably, right?
It turns out that the group that are making this claim are related to the group that opposed our recent tranche of gun laws in this country, who tried to argue that your Second Amendment applies to our loose-knit constitutional system.
Well, obviously it would. I mean, of course.
Well,
So-
when we take you over, it will. Be sure.
Well, so
Yeah.
on that, on that notion of you taking us over, this is an amusing little, well, amusing or disturbing, depending on how you want to think about
Yeah,
it.
I'm sure.
So one of our corporate CEOs, a man by the name of Rod Jury, who runs an organization called Xero, which basically produces accounting software, is trying to persuade the government that we should reach out to 200 billionaires around the world and offer them a bolt hole in this country as long as they commit to living here and also investing $50 billion in our economy. And this was the man who managed to get Peter Thiel of Palantir citizenship in this country. So yes, there is a distinct possibility that your 1% will come to this country and take over through beneficial investment.
Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, dear.
I mean,
Well,
given we have closed our borders for the next probably 12 months at this stage, being a billionaire might be the only way to come and visit Hobbiton in this country now.
I'm sure.
interesting. Well,
So, did any of you hear about, in terms of conspiracy theories and the virus, other places? There were a few stories about I think it's a radio tower, a 5G radio tower that somebody burnt. Yeah, somebody burned down.
Yes, this has become a very popular sport in the UK for some reason.
Yeah, but I'm not. Go ahead.
Go ahead, please.
No, I just I don't have the details on it, and I'm wondering if anybody knows them. What was the logic? What's the story?
It's a simple logic, which doesn't mean it's logical, and certainly doesn't mean it's factual. But the claim is that 5G destroys your immune system, especially in close proximity. And because of that, coronavirus spread much farther. And if we can get rid of the towers, burn them down, and then people will be much safer, and they'll have a much more likely chance of not getting it or not dying from it. That's what the people are saying.
Interesting.
I mean, there is also a variant of that, which is coronavirus is in fact the result of the 5G rollout. So there are two kind of hypotheses. The one which is it weakened our immune system, which is why we're falling ill. And the other one is no, there is no COVID-19. It's simply the effect of 5G radiation in the atmosphere. Burn the towers down and COVID-19 will disappear completely.
What I'm wondering is why it's possible to burn one of these towers down. They seem
Not
pretty
burn it.
indestructible. But
Right.
No, with enough heat, you can destroy anything.
It just need a super soaker full of gasoline, and away you go. Just
okay.
spray all the way from the bottom to the top. Give it a few more, and then up it goes.
Okay.
At least that's how we've been doing it here.
Oh, okay. That's how it was done in West Texas. Okay.
But Lee,
I-
jet fuel can't melt 5G mast towers.
Really?
That's what I thought.
That's what I thought. Yeah, I've heard that somewhere before.
No, I
Yeah,
completely made
yeah,
that up. It's
that's
completely
right.
new.
Something about jet fuel melting things. Huh.
See, so it seems we are getting a fair number of conspiracy theories about COVID-19, about its origin. So it does turn out that the US security apparatus is investigating the possibility that COVID-19 was accidentally leaked from a lab somewhere in Wuhan, and that the Chinese government is covering up its true origin. They're not necessarily investigating the claim it was developed as a bioweapon. And then, of course, you've got your 5G conspiracy theories, and there's a whole bunch of conspiracy theories about good vibrations and the like. Is this new or novel, or are we simply seeing the same old thing through the lens of a current crisis, do you think?
Well, the idea of a cover-up is absolutely normal and natural, especially in a crisis. So in that sense, it's very continuous with the usual conspiracy theories that we analyze. I've heard some really strange ones, though. Some really, really strange stuff.
Please,
It's actually,
give us some
it's-
examples.
it's an American virus that was originally designed at Chapel Hill, the university. I believe that's in Chapel Hill is in North Carolina.
Yeah, North Carolina.
Yeah. And so then what they did was it was part of this like weapons project with China, and they gave this virus to the Chinese.
Mm.
And so the Chinese could play around with it and experiment with it. And then either it was purposely leaked into the population to do just a sort of test of what a real killer pandemic would look like, which this isn't by comparison to what it might be. And it's actually part of an American-Chinese plan to release this, track it around the world, and then share our data.
So
That's
it's
what-
sort of like a 21st century global Tuskegee.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Those globalists.
That's right. Mm.
I mean, this does
Oh,
sound
well.
like the plot of a very bad made-for-TV thriller, where the good-hearted scientists
it?
came up with a plan, but it all went disastrously wrong when someone leaked
That's
the
right.
virus 2 days too soon.
Yep.
We shall see.
Yes.
We shall see.
Actually, I was also thinking about movies. A student of mine had just before class, about 2 weeks ago, had just seen a movie that I believe is called Epidemic. Marty, have you seen it?
No.
Or it might be even called Pandemic. It's a documentary from the early 2000s that predicts some of this, that makes some moves toward like, this is how it would happen, this is how it could happen, this is why it would be very bad globally, what sort of structures aren't in place to manage such an outbreak, and it's a matter of time. So I'll try to look it up.
Yeah, please, and send us a link for that. I'd enjoy it. Have any of you seen the movie Contagion?
Oh,
A
It's a
while
horror.
back, yes, yeah.
Really accurate, really credible attempt to
that may
project
be the
what-
movie.
It's a great movie, and it's not a documentary. It is a drama.
Oh,
With some
then.
extremely, we have Lawrence Fishburne, some really heavyweight actors. I believe
Wow.
in 2007 it was released. It's a good movie. I recommend it.
Nice. I'll look for it.
I've
It looks like-
received several emails from people claiming that Michael Crichton not only predicted this, but had inside information about this because of the plot of
Wow.
the Andromeda strain.
Well, Michael, everything Michael says in his books on an infinite horizon eventually comes true. Just like Alex Jones.
Ah, yes.
The Alex
I mean,
Jones law.
I mean,
I think Alex Jones says eventually does come true. I was told that.
it's true because Alex Jones says a lot of things. Some of them are bound to come true eventually.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, I recommend the movie. You'll enjoy it.
That's good to know.
It's touching and it's got a good plot.
Oh, one of them, I'm not sure which of these it is. I'm going to put things in chat, but one of them is called Unseen Enemy, and I think that's the one my student had seen. And she was a little surprised and was getting sort of conspiracy theorist-ish. Conspiracy theorist, can we say that?
Yeah, we can say.
About COVID, having watched the movie. Another student, and I'm wondering if any of my Northern Hemisphere friends, either you know about this, or maybe you do, because you may have seen it or read about it. Apparently, and I had someone who I spoke with who asked me, well, is this, what do you say about the arguments that this isn't really that serious? I mean, we're shutting the economy down and it's not that bad. And I said, what makes you think it's not that bad? This was again about 2 weeks ago. And she said, so, I've seen pictures of people walking out of the Brooklyn hospitals are showing that there's nobody in these hospitals in New York. There's no problem. They're empty. There's nothing going on and there's no trouble. And I said, where did you see these images? And there was a sort of a well of friend. And I was like, well, could it have been Fox News? Just make sure you see, look at where your news is coming from. But it was an interesting moment to talk about how do you know what's real, what's not, with somebody who wasn't sure.
Yeah, are these the photographs of the Jarvis Center in New York City? Because it is largely deserted. The Jarvis Center in New York City.
Yeah,
That's actually mainstream media has been reporting that, but not as the non-existence or the massive exaggeration of the virus, but just as a success story.
Right.
But it would be interpreted in your student's way.
Right, so that things get sort of the story, or the visual of that gets attached to a different storyline that's like there's no virus there and this is all hyped.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, we have a version of that locally. We have an opinion piece writer by the name of Mike Hoskins, who at this stage, depending on the day of the week, either thinks that the government has acted inappropriately because they haven't done enough, or inappropriately because they've done their overreacting. But one of his continual attack lines of the government is, look, there aren't that many people in ICU at the moment.
Yes.
Obviously, the pandemic isn't that bad. And the response is, well, there aren't that many people in ICU because our elimination strategy seems to be working. If it wasn't working, there'd be people in those ICU beds. But he's taking it as evidence that, no, we've overreacted because, look, no one's getting sick.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's exactly what's happening here. And it's a sort of a weird logic that I think is underneath a lot of the stuff that the organized protests in the U.S. And the push to stop the shelter-in-place orders.
Would you like to hear another conspiracy theory?
I'd love to.
Yes.
Okay. This one is focusing on this new movement to bring massive lawsuits against China, seize their assets throughout the Western world, including the United States, Western Europe, obviously, and then make them pay, cripple their economy for a decade, literally put them back maybe 20 years. And in this way, the Chinese will be destroyed. Cicero had this habit of ending his speeches with "Carthage must be destroyed."
Right.
Delenda is Carthago.
Exactly. You got it. So this is what we did. We purposely let the virus in, usually in the form of allowing American citizens from China to return and not properly quarantining them, knowing it would get loose, knowing that would cause not catastrophic, but terrible damage. And then we can use that to drag China's economy down and retake for America an uncontested place
Wow.
in the world order, kind of.
Wow.
It's nice. I mean, I've kind of tried to reformulate it so it doesn't sound completely wacko, but yeah, that's one of the ideas going around right now. Popped up a couple of days ago.
And then where are people supposed to find the iPhones?
Right.
Well, no, but I think the point
great
is
again. We're going to build them here.
well, no.
Yeah.
Surely the point is once you've taken over China, you can take over Shenzhen, and then you can produce the iPhones yourself in the new 53rd state of the US, Shenzhen, China.
Oh, I thought we'd do that in Australia and New Zealand.
Well, actually, no. So, right. So New Zealand wouldn't work because we actually don't have enough
We're
natural.
coming for you.
Yeah, we don't have enough natural resources to actually have a high-tech sector like that. But Australia has all the mineral resources you need. So focus
Wow.
on Australia. The official story is New Zealand does not have the resources you need. So please don't come and find us.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, so that's another fun one, and it will be interesting to see how this seize the assets and make them pay dearly for what is being argued by the states at this time here in the United States was and they use the word conspiracy, a clear conspiracy to hide the virus, to lie about its infectability, its transmission mechanism, person to person, and then to shut the world out. So we couldn't find out how bad it was until it was too late. And for that, there's our damage, there's our negligence,
Right.
and all of that was a conspiracy, and for that we will make them pay dearly, legally. That's the kind of arguments you'll be seeing in court, the kind of arguments being made right now in several state legislatures here in the United States.
And actually, that gives a nice little window into talking about the possibility of a cock-up versus a conspiracy. Because I don't think anyone denies that China Beijing probably knew more about what was going on in Wuhan and Hubei than they admitted to, say, back in December or January. And so the question then becomes, is it a case that they were covering up this particular bit of health data, or is the nature of the authoritarian state in China, where social media is basically banned, and no one wants to speak out against administrators or people higher up in the chain of command, was that actually hindering information getting to the right sources? So it's a cock-up due to the administrative nature of the way the Chinese government works, or is it both a combination of there was a cock-up and then it became a cover-up as officials went, we can't admit that we fouled up the initial reporting. So now we've got to cover up the fact that we knew things before we did and only started revealing information after we knew the crisis was actually already embedded.
Yeah, it's both. I think that's the argument they're making. The cover-up was the consequence of what you would say in the Northern Hemisphere of a Chinese screw-up, whereas you would say in the South a cock-up.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we may not want to take this path right now, but I think thinking about rumor and sort of gossip or rumor as news, attempts at news gathering and news making right now is also really interesting. And I'm thinking about, over the past month, information that has circulated that turns out not to be true, or that people thought was true and wasn't. The CDC's, the CDC has conflicted with the WHO over and over again, and been behind the curve, if we think the WHO is right, on a bunch of different stuff, and they've made some bad calls. And I think it's interesting to consider, at least speculate on how many people knew that, and how they're making decisions, because I hear a lot of people in the US still sort of, they're just absolutely, if the CDC said it, then that's true. And it's not that the CDC was saying things that were absolutely knowably false. It's that with the use of masks, for example, right, the CDC was telling Americans not to use masks, that they were useless, no point, right, unless they were N95.
Well, but then they said we should look like bandits. We should put on bandanas around our face.
Right.
Can't be
Are
any
you
better.
kidding? Yeah.
Yeah.
And, people of color are like, are you kidding me? Right. Yeah, that's great. So yeah, and I mean, that was really interesting. There were a series of conversations where, I suggested people could actually wear masks, and there would be this, oh, the CDC says no, and I would say, oh, the WHO says yes. Right. There are other sorts of forms of unclear things. I and my housemate have been trying to figure out, exactly what. There have been reports, no, first it was absolutely no, cats, dogs can't get it. Then it was like, oh, wait, a tiger got it. Oh, wait, right. Yeah. And so there are varying degrees of, because the information, where it comes from, how good it is, all of that is unclear, right? And it's difficult to evaluate truth claims. Right.
I mean, it's always a lot easier to evaluate things well after the fact than it is in the midst of a crisis, especially in a situation where there's a lot of information being produced by a lot of different agencies. And such agencies aren't necessarily talking to each other.
Correct.
So we had a situation here when we went into the level 4 alert system, which was basically our extreme lockdown, where the Ministry of Health was making particular claims, and the government official about the lockdown was making claims that weren't contradictory, but were somewhat contrary to the Ministry of Health. And people were going, so which one is it? Do we take the government spokesperson at their word, as we do X, or do we take the health ministry at its word, and we do X? And then the government went, no, sorry, actually, we're a little confused as to what's going on here at the moment, because we are developing policy on the hoof. And unfortunately, that sometimes means that some people are working with yesterday's memo, but are talking at the podium today.
Yikes. Yep. Yeah.
Let's just show that. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, so I was about to make a joke. This is where having Stalin in charge, where Stalin makes all the decisions, suddenly makes a lot of sense.
Why?
Well, for one,
I know. Unified authority.
Also, one man, one blame.
There's that.
That's right.
You can get to him. What do you think about the communist WHO, World Health Organization theory?
Oh, I don't know it.
Well, it's been pushed pretty hard around here.
Oh, that's interesting.
Oh, well, it's part of that general hatred of the United Nations that characterizes large swaths of American politics.
Yeah.
The theory is that the director of the World Health Organization, which is part of the United Nations, is actually, he's a puppet for the Chinese government. And one of the reasons this is because, in fact, the man is a self-identified communist. And so the thought was that what the World Health Organization was saying for a while was simply what China was feeding it. And
that's right.
And the CDC actually did a much better job.
I did hear that.
Yeah.
I forgot about that. Early on, that was something that was, I think, shared or at least floated across the political spectrum, which made it interesting, right?
Mhm.
Because often there's not, but that there were questions about whether the WHO was complicit in Chinese suppression of data or Chinese sort of governmental face saving.
No, if I remember right, this is perhaps the first non-European WHO director, though. So there is that.
There's that.
He is an opposition figure to the sort of NATO North Atlantic sensibilities.
Right.
So I mean, there, like a lot of these things, there's some basis that he's not. He was not at all the preferred candidate of many.
Right.
And of course, it fits in quite nicely with the fact that when a government thinks that a global body like NATO, the UN, or the WHO is doing excellent work, then we take everything they say as being gospel. But as soon as it goes against, say, some local politicking issue, we suddenly go, well, why would you listen to those particular people? So there's a nice example here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. The UN keeps on telling our government that we are not treating our indigenous people correctly, that we should be doing more in the way of reparation and trying to heal the divide in our country. Whenever the UN says that, no matter who is in government, the government goes, oh, the UN should keep their sticky beaks out of our local politics. But as soon as the UN will say something, say, about the handling of the Middle East crisis by actors overseas, our government goes, yep, that's precisely the kind of wisdom that we need to adhere to. It does turn out that these global organizations are very useful when you want to go around doing a little bit of the old whipping.
Matt, didn't you once tell me, I believe in 2015, that the Maori, the indigenous people of New Zealand, had, in kind of an act of amazing forgiveness, given the country to the Europeans that had come in there?
So yeah, so basically this is the
Something like that.
the iwi in Auckland basically went, look, you took most of our land and you haven't really given us reparation. But at the same time, we're going to forgive you for doing that, and we're also not going to charge you rent on the land that we've suddenly got back.
Okay.
Which, was taken to be that's really, really kind. And Maori went, well, you know, we're at least trying to heal the divide. Come to the table.
They should have kept the damage deposit, though. Even if they didn't charge rent, I would have.
Oh, believe me, the way that we have modified the waterfront, those bonds would be well exhausted by now.
Wow. What fun. So the Australians and the New Zealanders, they have this same kind of, if only transient loathing for international bodies like the United Nations, which is very popular here in the United States.
I mean, in Australia, it's probably more so because Australian politics resembles American politics a lot more. There's a lot more alignment on the right when it comes to politicking in Australia with the right in the US. Aotearoa, New Zealand has always kind of prided itself as not being particularly Australian, but it does seem that at least our political right is beginning to sing from the same hymn book. And that's the hymn book which we're seeing in Australia and the UK, because it turns out if you follow the money, everyone is being advised by the same political advisors operating out of Australia.
Interesting.
There's a warranted conspiracy theory
Yeah.
for you. The right is coalescing behind very successful messaging platforms in one policy and then going, how can we make this apply in a country which is relatively similar and get the same results?
Interesting. Very interesting. So eventually this is going to lead us into the conversation of the globalist conspiracy to conquer all nations and organize them under a sort of antichrist-like
Oh,
director of the United Nations, and that perhaps this was the coronavirus was an attempt to make this happen, and then it backfired against the globalists. That's a theory I wouldn't be at all surprised to hear somebody start peddling.
Well, I mean, especially given all of the claims about the building of the temple on the Temple Mount, and the surprising coalition between the religious right and the notion of establishing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, so you can bring about the apocalypse so that Jesus comes back again. I can imagine two versions of that theory, one where the UN is aiding and abetting that, or the other one, which is the UN is being led by, as you say, the Antichrist to stop this momentous event from occurring in our time. And in fact, if we're talking about films, there's a sequence of two films. One is called the Omega Code. The other one is called the Omega Code Megiddo. And they were both produced by Christian filmmakers back in the late 90s, early 2000s. They both star Michael York as the Antichrist, and it's all about a Jewish conspiracy to install Michael York as the head of the UN to bring about the apocalypse to stop Jesus from returning for a second time.
wow.
I love it.
So
great.
The first film it's a bit humdrum, but the second film is actually quite spectacular. And you kind of feel that the second film was given to a director who wanted to make a really big spectacle action film and was then told in the last scene you have to have a Bible quote.
Is this the same authors that cooked up the Left Behind movie series?
It certainly comes from the same genre, yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. And it had a very similar doomsday. Satan comes back in the form of the Antichrist, and then they have this big fight over who's going to rule the world. And of course, God wins. But it's one of the classic Christian conspiracy theories that they lifted out of the book of Revelations. And it is a conspiracy theory. It just has a supernatural dimension.
Right.
And there's also a film starring Nick Cage.
Well.
Yeah, so there are actually two Left Behind film series, one of which is 5 films long and is incredibly low budget. And then they decided to try and reboot that with a Nick Cage-led version of the first book. And it's very much a Nick Cage film. It's a very Nick Cage film.
I've got to see it, just for fun.
Oh, yes. It's I wouldn't recommend it as high art. We actually even wouldn't recommend it as low art. I simply recommend it for, if you enjoy Nick Cage, this is a film with Nick Cage in it.
Yeah. I like Nick.
Oh, I mean, he's kind of wonderful, especially when he truly commits to the whole bug nut crazy Nick Cage portrayal, which no one else can do. Nick Cage is kind of the master of spiraling out of control in a scene in a way which is just astounding to watch.
Isn't Nick in Raising Arizona? The
He
Coen
is.
Brothers?
Yeah.
That's a good movie. That's fun. It's their best comedy, I think.
Yep, no, I'd agree.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about best, but it's amazing.
It's up there.
It's way up there. Yeah, it does stand the test of time. Wasn't he in the Big Lebowski?
No, you're
No?
maybe thinking of John Turturro,
I totally am thinking of John Turturro. You're exactly
also
right.
another great actor,
Yeah.
who's actually in one of
Yes.
my favorite comedies of all time, a film which was meant to be called A Night at the Ballet, because it was very much a Marx Brothers style comedy, but ended up being called Brain Donors instead. And it's the finest modern day Marx Brothers style comedy ever made.
Wow, brain donor?
Yeah, Brain Donors, plural.
Oh, brain donors.
So
yeah, I will
it's
look it up.
John Turturro, Mel Smith, and I can never remember the name of the third guy. And it's truly astounding. Truly astounding.
1992.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's the one.
I've never heard of it.
Hmm.
But
It
I know.
didn't do it did very well on video. It didn't do particularly well in the cinema.
right.
Can any of you grab your phone quickly and help me with this cognitive dissonance I'm having? Could you fact on the Big Lebowski and see who the Lebowski was? Because I'm having this feeling it's someone else. But I'd love to be corrected.
You mean so let me go to IMDb.
Yeah, see who it is.
Yeah, we're talking about let's see.
I have played the Little Lebowski. You know,
Yeah, right. The Lebowski.
As in the dude, as in Jeff Bridges, the dude.
that's the
No.
guy I'm thinking
Oh,
of.
you meant Jeff Bridges. I thought you meant the. Never mind. I thought you meant the other Lebowski.
Okay, I got it. All right. No, not the dude in the wheelchair.
The Rich Lebowski,
Yeah.
as opposed to our Lebowski, the dude. Yeah.
Well, it seems that now that we've moved away from talk of conspiracy theories to films we have watched, this is probably a natural place to bring this particular conversation to an end. But hopefully we'll be doing this again very soon for getting
Yeah.
updates as to what's
Yes.
going on with COVID-19, because who knows what the world will look like in a week's time or 2 weeks' time. As I was, a friend of mine, well, I made the mistake back in February. A friend of mine sent me a text, do you think this whole coronavirus thing is going to be a big issue? And I said, no, like SARS, it'll blow over. In a month's time, we won't even be talking about it. My friend keeps on sending me that text back to go, you were wrong. You were wrong. Okay, so I will never commit to anything ever again.
Yeah, right now I still got my money on reopening everything in the fall. We'll see.
Well, I mean,
And
I would like to think that's true.
For a long time when I get that wrong. Not a problem. My
But the
pleasure.
question is, do you mean your fall or our fall? Because if
Yeah,
it's your
right.
fall, it's
you wouldn't
soon. If it's
your
our fall, it's a year away.
Just a year, right? Yeah. The fall here. Let's see. The month of, oh, geez. When does fall start, Lee? It's kind of October, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Fall.
Yeah, because I mean that's our
We're the-
spring. Yeah.
Well, it's on to the X-Files. I'm going to watch some reruns.
That's great.
Research
Excellent.
work.
Absolutely.
All right. Well,
Pleasure.
thank you very much, and I will talk with you all anon.
Unknown. Bye.
Bye-bye, guys.
Toddy, bye.
And there you have it, your sultry, steamy four-way interview with respected members of the community theory theorist community.
So, any
Conspiracy
comments,
theory
feedback, or anything you want to add to that conversation, Joshua?
Not really, to be honest. It was pleasingly amiable, nice sort of friends having a chat atmosphere. Some of you seem to be more up to the play with conspiracy theories around COVID-19 than others, but I don't know if that's just some of you pay more attention to wacky news and some of you focus on other things or not. But it was interesting to see. It points the swapping of stories and also I hadn't heard that one. And I stopped talking just as you took a drink because that's the kind of guy I am.
Oh, that's a good point and well made.
But But no, there we go. That was 43 minutes or something. So it's probably taken up all the time we have for this episode. So let's not dally. But we should, of course, before we go, talk about what our patrons will get to hear in the bonus episode, which we're about to stop and record. What have we got this week?
Yes, let's not dally but dilly on the bonus content that's coming up. So we'll be talking about the grave danger that Kim Jong-un may be suffering. We'll be mentioning ever so briefly those mole children we never discussed a few months ago. We'll then be moving on to a minor COVID-19 story which claims our PM has got the entire country under an illegal lockdown, and then mentioning the fact that, well, you know that drug that President Trump's been talking about? It's a bit of a bust when it's been tried. And finally, the US appears to be investigating whether COVID-19 was actually started in a lab in China.
So if you want to hear more about that and you're one of our patrons, good news, you're about to. If you'd like to hear more about that and you're not one of our patrons, then you can just become one. That would be awesome. You could do that.
Would be.
Do that by going to patreon.com and searching for the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, or by going to conspiracism.podbean.com, the site where this podcast is sort of officially hosted, and using their patronage system. And that, I believe, is all we have to say this week.
Indeed, to quote NBC, that's murder she wrote.
But not the murder of my children, which didn't happen because I didn't do it.
Allegedly.
That's good enough for me. Goodbye.
Toodly pip pip.
You've been listening to the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, starring Josh Addison and Dr. MRX Denton, which is written, researched, recorded, and produced by Josh and M. You can support the podcast by becoming a patron via its Podbean or Patreon campaigns. And if you need to get in contact with either Josh or M, you can email them at podcastconspiracy@gmail.com or check their Twitter accounts, Monkey Fluids and Conspiracism.